wouldn't be right that we don't come to a conference and not have an evil consultant talk to you about generative AI, right? I mean, you've got to have it, right? But because I was very conscious that you didn't want to just hear from an evil consultant, I asked Marie to foolishly volunteer to join me. So what we're going to talk to you about today is very briefly not the hype, right? If you want the hype, just go to your generative AI tool of choice or go to Google and type in videos on GenAI and you'll have lots of evil consultants talk to you about that on videos, right? Or go to another conference. What Marie and I wanted to talk to you instead was actually the reality. So what's actually happening out in there in the big bad world, not just in insurance, but also in other industries as well. So we were hoping to talk to you for about 10 to 15 minutes and then get a bit of audience participation going, just in terms of kind of questions, kind of comments, views, etc. So before we go any further, I always find it quite interesting when we talk about AI, generative AI, because whenever I talk to people, they always have different views or different definitions of what it is. So I thought I might attempt to try and give some definitions. But I also wanted to stand on this stage and say, actually, before I do that, how many people here work in insurance? Raise hands. Awesome. How many people work in other industries? Okay, for the people over there who work in other industries, I apologise for what I'm about to say next. Don't you find it really annoying, sorry, for the people who work in the insurance industry, whenever we get compared to things like banking, and we get told, oh, you guys are really behind in insurance. Excuse me, we've been using AI for at least the last 10 years, right? We've been using machine learning in pricing, etc. Sorry, you can tell I'm going to get on a soapbox in this talk. And it really, really annoys me when people talk to us about the latest and greatest, and it's just like, well, no, we've already been doing it, right? We've been doing it for like the last 10, 15 years. So the reason I wanted to say that is because on the slide you can sort of see some of the things that we've got, and we've got machine learning. We've been doing that, we've been seeing it, we've done it. Marie's done it, right? More importantly, Marie's done it, and she'll talk about it a bit later. There was big hype about generative AI, right? And the way I think about generative AI is you ask... think of it like an artist who has seen millions of paintings and then amalgamates those paintings to create a new one based on the paintings it's already seen. But basically that's all it can do. And then you've got the next thing in the word salad, which is Agentic AI. I don't know about you. I'm conscious I have some of my colleagues here and they're going to get deeply embarrassed about what I'm going to say next. Agentic AI, I'd never heard of it last year. Right, some of you might have done, I hadn't. And so a lot of my clients this year said, well, Mohammad, you've talked about Agentic AI, it's about agents doing particular tasks, and they can think about an agent as like your PA. You can give them a task to do, and you give them the background to that task, and then they can take that information and then do more than just do a simple query. They can take what you want. Let's say you want to book a holiday. You tell them the parameters of the holiday, and they'll find you a place to go. They'll find you hotels to stay. And because you'll tell them about sunny weather that you want to have, they'll find places in the world for you to go to. So that's basically what an agent does. But they asked me, well, what's the latest thing in the word salad? What's the next big thing in AI? And that's going to be artificial general intelligence. So artificial general intelligence, for all of you, is Skynet. Right? So think about the Terminator movies. It's basically a machine that can think for itself and do things for itself and basically will probably wipe out humanity. When is AGI going to come? That's a really interesting question. So if you ask the folks at Google, they will tell you mid-2030s. If you look at all the peer review research, guess who's actually done some homework, and look at what the majority of people say, they kind of say between 2040 and 2060. And the reason I'm giving you that timeline is because I think part of the reason that we've all heard about GenAI and the hype is it's actually been here relatively recently, right? 2022, 2023 was when you kind of get public access to generative AI. The way I like to think about generative AI and agentic AI and artificial collective intelligence. So for those of you that need something for the word salad to mention to colleagues and to show that you've learned something, Artificial collective intelligence is the next big thing. Now, I will explain what that is. The way I would describe it is we're not even at base camp for Mount Everest. We're just at the bottom, looking up and going, oh, that's quite tall, right? So that's important to hold in mind. So, you've heard about lots of use cases in insurance, and some of these are on this slide, right? Rather than talk about this, what I'm going to talk to you about is the fact that there are lots of studies out there that say that if you implement generative AI properly, if you implement agentic AI, you will knock 20 to 40%, or you'll make 20 to 40% savings. No one's done it yet. And why has no one done it? And it's not because they haven't done some of the things on these slides, right? It's not because they haven't taken simple processes and used AI and agentic AI to do it. It's because they haven't got rid of the humans, right? So no one has trusted the software enough yet, trusted their processes yet, to get rid of the humans and then get the benefits of it, right? Now, there are obviously exceptions to what I've just said, but generally that's the reason why you're not seeing companies go out there and declare in their quarterly or annual reporting, look how much saving we've made because we've implemented the corporate version of ChatGPT, etc. Right? In terms of where people are looking at using agents, etc., I did think it would be useful to chat to you about real-life examples that we've seen. And actually, what's interesting is the way some firms are thinking about this, right? So we're working with a global multi-brand, multi-industry B2C firm. If I mention their name, you would all have heard about it, right? You walk into a supermarket, you will have all bought their products, right? So what they're doing is a S/4HANA implementation. If none of you know what S/4HANA is, don't worry, it's not important. All you need to know is that what they're trying to implement is a tool that's very expensive to implement, that basically allows you to think about the MI you've got, interact with your suppliers, supply chain. So for a big multinational, multi-brand B2C firm, this is really important. They are doing a really thin implementation, a very lean implementation. But why are they doing that? What they're actually doing is they're implementing that, and to every supplier, they're creating an agent, an AI agent. Phase one is, okay, learn about all the data that's passing between our firm and the supplier. Phase two is give me some insight as to when we should order from the supplier, how we should optimize price, etc. Phase three is they're making the assumption that their supplier will eventually have an agent talking to them. So they're trying to get ahead of the game and have their agent in first. Because their assumption is, if we get our agent to analyze all the data first, it will outwit and out-optimize the agent on the supply chain side. Now, why am I saying that to you? Well, for those of you that work in P&C insurance, as an example, or deal with clients in P&C insurance, we are, as an industry, one of the biggest buyers of white goods. Because we replace them when, like, houses burn down. How many of us think about supply chain in that way? The second one is a global supermarket chain. They've been thinking about using agents in a similar way, but instead of doing it with suppliers, they're also using it to analyze customer behavior. So if you're in the UK, you've probably got access to a Nectar card or a Tesco Club card. If you're in other territories, I apologise, I don't know what the equivalent would be, but you're probably on some kind of reward scheme. And why do companies do that for you? God, this is being recorded, so I have to be careful about how I phrase this next bit. The reason you're on a reward scheme is so that they can monitor what you buy, right, or how you purchase. And so what they've done is they're getting agents to specifically look at groups of customers, how they buy, and then feed you information so that you want to buy more. And you'll have seen this for those of you that use Amazon, because of course it pops up with things that says, well, you bought this, how about buying that? And so they're using agents to help predict that behavior. And then we've got a global multinational insurer. They've done a deal with Palantir. And they said that if they hadn't have done this, they'd have got growth of about 10% per annum per year. By putting all of their front end into Palantir, they forecast they'll get 20%. That's massive. And that's in specialty and commercial lines. So if you're not doing this, are you really behind the curve? And the answer is no, you're not, right? Because what does all of this depend on? All of this depends on having great data or robust data or data that you trust, right? So it's about sorting out your data. That's the big thing, the big thread that connects all of these three. And I'm teaching you all to suck eggs because you've had IT consultants tell you for years now that you need to revamp your data systems. Who remembers data lakes? And that was the big thing, wasn't it? And then they became data pools, and then they became data swamps. I am not here telling you that you need to buy the latest and greatest data system, unless, of course, you're using PwC, in which case you definitely do. But actually, you need to get us to implement it. We don't have a piece of kit that does it. But flippantly, less flippantly, what I am telling you is that you do need to think about your data. You need to think about how robust it is, what you're using it for. Because the nice thing about generative AI is that the use that you thought you needed for the data might be very, very different, right? So that's the big thing. The other big thing is, and depending on the size of your firm, and Marie and I were talking about this before we went on stage, if you're going to use a tool, should you use a commercial tool? And the reason I say that is a commercially available tool will have been trained on data. Do you understand the bias within that data set? How does that bias in that data set translate to what you're trying to use the tool for? And so actually, if you talk to the people who actually run a lot of the GenAI firms, they'll all say that you should actually start with something that's really skinny, that hasn't been trained at all, and you should train it on your data. But how many of us are doing that? How many of us are thinking about that? How many of us think about data bias and how we spot it? So that's why I say we're at the bottom of Mount Everest, all of us looking up, going, what do we do with this? How do we make the savings?
Cool, thanks. So I just want to bring to light, I guess, where we are with Ernix and how we use AI in pricing at AllClear, and also talk about where we see the future opportunity. So we've been on a real journey of onboarding to getting predictive AI in production, and now we're just sort of looking at how we, scale that and evolve. You can see there's a bit of a very, very small timeline on there, where we took a structured approach on our onboarding journey. We started off with a proof of concept essentially on one brand, and we migrated that across all of our brands. And obviously one of our key success factors was the cross-departmental collaboration and Ernix's support. So this wasn't just a pricing project, it was about involving tech, finance, operations, all the pricing guys, and so they all had to work together to essentially build confidence and make sure that, this was a very, very successful delivery. And then we sort of talk about what we've achieved. We've already got predictive, we've embedded predictive AI in pricing. Our models are automatic, they're explainable. We've got a lot of governance and sign-off processes. And what we saw when we migrated across all of the brands that were fully in production is a 32% improvement in efficiency. And this is just like one of our metrics that are directly correlated to our distributor profit, and also a 60% uplift in revenue. So it's not about getting fast, or it's not just about speed, but it's about being able to continuously refine what you're doing, improve the sophistication, and essentially drive value faster. What we've also been looking at, so say sort of where we see the future outlook and what we've been focusing a lot of time on, is how we're using generative assistants to, for example, help us onboard new people and upskill them very, very quickly. Also get it to tell us, give us the analytics a lot faster. So things like CoPilot really help us improve the time to value. And the other pieces are, okay, we've got a lot of automation, maybe in things like technical modelling, but how could you also use Python more to automate all of the repetitive tasks, like running the data or packaging up some rating rules for deployment. So all we're trying to do is just make sure that none of our analysts spend any time on a lot of the repetitive tasks. And ultimately, if they don't spend time on repetitive tasks, that frees them up to focus on more, things like pricing strategy. So that's how automation essentially translates into money. And then also, we've been thinking about, the agentic workflow. So, okay, how can you now link up all parts of your process from data, building the model automatically, deciding on some pricing strategies, packaging something up for the analyst to choose from in terms of a strategy to deploy. I guess the idea where we would love to be, which you always tell me I'm a little bit crazy, is okay, well, how would I be able, I want to be in a situation where, okay, you've the agentic AI agents monitor the AVE drifts, automatically tell you what you need to adjust. So they've told you, hey, the market's moved or your claims experience has worsened, and it automatically updates with a change, which is a little bit different to what we label dynamic pricing at the moment.
Yeah, and I think what Marie's talking about is a really, really, I think, interesting example. What it could eventually lead to is the artificial collective intelligence I was referring to before. So I think the way to think about things is, if you think about when I was talking about agentic AI and you've got these agents doing things, if you think about an agent doing a simple task, doing one or two tasks, preferably one, you might have an agent talking to another agent, talking to another agent, talking to another agent, talking to a human, to Marie's point. So you've summarised all this information, what do you do with that? And then the human says, well, why don't you do this? And now you've got another agent that sits there learning from what that human's saying, right? So really, really simple example. Imagine you've got, I'll take it to a different level, a specialty lines underwriter. A specialty lines if you talk to lots of insurance firms, they'll all say, we've got these amazing specialty lines underwriters. It's like Animal Farm, for those of you who read it. Some are more special than others. Let's just leave it at that, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great if you could take those more specialty underwriters and get them to write more risks? Answer is obviously yes, because they're the most profitable underwriters. If they could write more risks, they'll write more profitable business, right? What's their biggest problem? Capacity. Don't have the time to do it. Can only look at a certain number of risks. But what happens if you had an agentic AI series of tools that would bring in all the data, let's say, from the pricing actuaries, bring in all the external data that the underwriter looks at? That might be one agent. A third agent might be trying to understand how the underwriter puts those two bits of information together, pricing actuarial work, the broader information that you're bringing in, let's say weather, other sources like sources of internet and publicly available data, how you put it together and then tweak that technical actuarial price to get to the underwriter price. If you had a series of agents that could do that and then get the underwriter to say, yeah, that's how I do it, or no, I do it in a slightly different way, you've suddenly got this network together of a human interacting with a load of agents. And that's artificial collective intelligence in a bit of a nutshell. Now that's doable in the next 2-3 years. And that's actually where the power could come from. But if you take my example and take that to its natural conclusion, how are we training the next set of specialty underwriters? How are you getting that judgment there? So what I'm not saying is you've got these agents that will write the business. No, they won't. Still be the specialty underwriter. But how do you train the next set of people? what technical skill sets or skill sets do those next generation people need to have? And I think that's what everyone is trying to grapple with at this moment. And some people will make some mistakes along the way, but that's the next biggest challenge other than the data, which is what I'd call the human capital problem. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thanks,
I really,
everyone.
really appreciate it.